Good evening. We are going to be in Genesis chapter 25. I have a close relative, not really relative. We call him our son, but he's not really our son. I joke with him. He loves to play basketball. I joke with him frequently about how that I barely missed being in the NBA. It's just that I can't dribble, I can't run, I can't shoot. That's the only thing that kept me out of the NBA. And, you know, that's a really good, it's pretty accurate, too. If I could do all those things greatly, I'd probably be there, right? Oh, if I was a little bit taller, too. You know, it's amazing that so many people want to do those kinds of things, but don't really realize that they don't really want to do them. Because for this young man, and I don't mean anything against him, but he would say, I'm going to be in the NBA. I'm going to be in the NBA. That was his dream. And we try to encourage him, right? Because everyone needs a dream. But every now and then I'd ask him, how much time you practicing? None. You outside shooting any hoops, doing any drills, outside working at it? No, not really. I'd say, you know, Michael Jordan practiced about 5 hours a day. He'd shoot 10,000 baskets a day. I don't know if it was that many. But that was the point, right? So our decisions, the things that we decide to do on a day in and day out basis, actually reveal what we really want, a lot more than the things that we say that we want. This is a really important idea. We're seeing this in the book of Genesis, and we'll see it all throughout the Bible. But it correlates to what Esau did and the decisions that he made, because the things that we treasure are the things that we seek. The things that we treasure are the things that we'll have. I read somewhere, and I don't know if this is true or not, but it sure seems this way. If you take a millionaire and take all of his money away, in a few years you come back to him, he'll probably be a millionaire again. If you take a poor man and you give him millions of dollars and check on him in a few years, he'll probably be poor again. It's because of the daily decisions that we make. Now, this is not a lesson about how to be rich. It simply illustrates what's going on in this text. So let's go back to Genesis chapter 25. And notice what's going on in the text, and hopefully we can see some things that will help us make better decisions in life. I appreciate Weston reading this. He's doing a great job with this, and I'm glad we can have him. And we're hoping to get some other boys up here reading too. But it talks about here in chapter 25 how that Abraham passed away, and then we have Isaac who had the two children, and in verse 23 there was a prophecy about them that said 2 nations are in your womb. This is speaking to Leah. It said 2 nations are in your womb, 2 people shall be separated from your body, 1 person shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. And this was a prophecy. It wasn't a declaration that this is fate. This is simply a statement. This is what's going to happen. God knew what was going to happen beforehand, and he knew how things were going to go. And we're seeing now the reason for that at the end of this chapter. So it says in verse 24, when her days were fulfilled for her to give birth, indeed there were twins in her womb, and the first came out red. He was like a hairy garment all over, so they called his name Esau. Afterward, his brother came out, and his hand took hold of Esau's heel, so his name was called Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. So the boys grew, and Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, but Jacob was a mild man, dwelling in tents. And Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. So Jacob then cooked a stew, and Esau came in from the field, and he was weary. And this is what was read earlier. And so Esau said to Jacob, please feed me with the same red stew, for I'm weary. Therefore his name is called Edom. But Jacob said, sell me your birthright. Esau said, look, I'm about to die, so what is the birthright to me? And Jacob said, swear to me as of this day. So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. And Jacob gave Esau bread and stew of lentils. Then he ate and drank, arose, and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. Now there's some things that we want to notice in here. First of all, look at the cunning of Jacob. He waited for the opportune time. Now, I don't know if he's ever mentioned this in the past. It never says anything about it, but it didn't seem like this was something that Esau had a hard time understanding. So it's possible that it was mentioned to him before. But whether or not it was, here is an opportune time for Jacob to mention this birthright, because Esau was in a need. He saw an opportunity he saw an opportunity to take advantage of the situation. He was opportunistic, right? It's very easy to run into people who will take advantage of people who, when they are down. It's very easy to find those kinds of people, and we don't want to be that kind of person. But we do see that he was very cunning. He was very smart to do it this way. If you're going to get something, you wait till they have a need. If you can supply the need, then you can exchange, right? You can have a trade. Now, there's nothing wrong with that in essence, but we need to be fair in what we're doing, and this certainly wasn't fair. And then he also, the second thing we can notice about this is in verse 33. He said, "Swear to me as of this day." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. So it was a decision that he said, I want this to be a permanent thing. I don't want you to go back on it later on. I want you to promise me that this is what's going to happen. And when that was done, then he gave up his birthright. He sold the birthright to Jacob. I don't know if that would have held up in court. I don't know if when they went to their father, if they could have gone to Isaac and told the situation and he would have overridden it. I have no idea, but I do know what happened. I also don't really understand the morality of this. I see some things here that show me that Jacob was very manipulative, that Jacob actually stole what was provided to his brother, Esau, and yet he's still blessed. There are a lot of things that we don't understand about the situation. We'll get a little bit more into that as we get into that situation later on in the book. But it is important to recognize that it happened, and that these kinds of things can happen to us if we're not careful. And so the warning for us is to make sure that we don't do the same thing that Esau did. And that's why we have this story in the account in there. We also see in here Esau's foolishness. All right, this is 32 through 34. Because look at what he said. Has such a weak mind in here. His thinking is not clear, and it might be because he was so tired. But think about what he said here. I'm about to die, so what is the birthright to me? Here I am. I'm at death's door, and when I die, what good does it do for me to have a birthright? So I might as well give him my birthright so I can live. Now, that's the thinking that he had, and that's just weak-mindedness. In fact, it's really strange because it shows he had improper values. It says here at the end of verse 34, thus Esau despised his birthright. And the reason for that is because of the thinking, the bad thinking, the weak thinking, the illogical thinking. Surely out of all the people that were servants of Isaac, and all the wealth that he had, because it's stated in this chapter that Abraham gave everything that he had to his son Isaac. Abraham was a wealthy man. You man, of all the people that were there, all the servants and all the things and all the people that could cook and all the animals and all the things that were around, all those people could not provide one little bit of food for Esau. That doesn't even make sense. And so what did he do, though? He's not thinking clearly. He's not thinking rationally. He sees something that he wants, and he wants to get it. Another part of this, of being weak-minded, is that he says, look, I'm about to die. That's another interesting thing. So you would assume that if he's about to die, have you ever seen someone who's literally about to die? They don't just casually walk in from outside. If they're about to die and they're been out in the field, and maybe he's starving to death, maybe it's been 30 days since he's eaten, or I have no idea. But I envision a man dragging himself by his elbows, coming up to Jacob saying, please just give me something to eat. That's not the picture that's painted here, but that's the picture I see if someone says, I'm about to die. Obviously, he's exaggerating in his own mind. Why? Because he wants something. He is trying to prove to convince himself that it's okay to get it. What choice do I have? That's something that's very important that we recognize in this section as we're looking at this. Let me see if I can get this to work. When we understand the situation, this is a very easy lesson. It's very short, to the point, but this is what we need to understand, that we can do the same thing that Esau did and despise our birthright. We can just give it up. Satan is looking for opportunity Look at what it says in 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 8. He's like a roaring lion. He's roaming the earth, seeking who he can devour. And what they're doing is looking for opportunities, the lions are. Satan is looking for an opportunity to strike. He is looking for an opportunity to find you in a weak moment so that he can jump and he can pounce. He can destroy you. This is what he wants more than anything. And so we have to be careful, and that's exactly what the point is in 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 8. He said that we need to be sober-minded. Now, the word sober, we know what it means. The word literally means to have not a drop of alcohol in your system. That's what sober is. And so what he's saying is don't have anything clouding your judgment. Don't have anything clouding your mind so that you can't pay attention to what's going on. And there are a lot of things that we can do to interrupt ourselves, that we can cloud our thinking. We start thinking in fuzzy ways, right? We give in to weaknesses, or we give in to we're tired, or how many times have people done things wrong and I just didn't have a good day. I didn't feel good, and so that gives me the right to do this or so. I used to use that excuse all the time. I didn't feel good, so of course I had the right to snap your head off. I didn't feel good, so I had the right to do this or that. But that's not the way it works. It doesn't matter how we feel. What matters is what we do, right? So we have to make decisions, but when we have those opportunities, we can do this. Now, Satan, I don't know how Satan works. I don't know how things work with the mind and all those kinds of things. I do know that he's active, but I also know that if you look in James chapter 1, it's our own desires that cause us to sin. It's the things that we want that cause us to sin, and so we start pursuing them, and perhaps it is the case that when we're looking for reasons to do the things that we really want to do anyway, Satan is there to simply provide us with all kinds of excuses and reasons why it's okay. They sure do seem to come pretty easily, don't they? And we find ourselves in so many. It could be that we learned this from our parents. It could be learned it from friends. It could be we just are very creative, and we've invented all kinds of ways to excuse our evil desires, our evil deeds. Because, oh, look, I have to do this. I remember reading about a preacher who was who preached about drinking. And after services, a man came up to him and said, "Brother, I have to have a job. And my job is a bartender. I have to eat." And you know what the preacher's response, it surprised me when I read it. The preacher's response was, "No, you don't. If you have to make a decision between eating and sinning, this is exactly what Cain did. He gave up his birthright so that he could have a piece of food." Now, I understand it's a little more complicated than that when you're talking about someone who has a job, but in essence, that's what it is. Our decisions come down to the things that we want, and we can justify to ourselves whatever we want to justify. And I've said so many times, you can make this thing say whatever you want it to say. If you want it to say that there are UFOs floating around, beaming people up and doing experiments on them, you can probably find enough information in this Bible to prove that if you want to. There is no reason you can't prove anything that you want to. In fact, it's such a big book. That's what's so amazing, that this book is so big, and that's what makes it such an easy book to misinterpret and mistranslate and to misuse, because there's so much here. But it doesn't matter what we think, it matters what we are looking for, right? And when we're looking for the truth, we'll find the truth. But if we're looking for an excuse, we'll find an excuse. That's the way life is. And God will allow us to do those things. He will allow us to find them, and Satan is certainly there to help us. We also need to recognize that there is a vulnerability. The vulnerability that Esau had was that he was tired. And this was a place where he became vulnerable in the way he thought. And the thinking process is, if you have to choose between, this is how we do it, we have to choose, like he did, we have to choose between dying and living. And then if we look at it from those terms, then it's pretty easy to say, well, if I die, then it doesn't matter if I have a birthright or not. But the decision really wasn't his whether he lived or died. And he didn't know if he was going to die or not. And he probably wasn't going to die. But what he did was he exposed what he was really seeking, what he was really looking for, and that was something was more important than the promises and the blessings of God. He was vulnerable there, and the reason he was vulnerable was because of the way he saw the situation. The way he saw the situation was that he's about to die. So he misinterpreted the situation, probably intentionally, so that he can have an excuse to have the stew and to give up the birthright. It seems pretty crazy to give up so much for something so little. And yet, how many times have we done that? I've seen people who were, because of drugs or alcohol or other things like that, they were so caught up in it, and they had run their family to the ground so much that they can't handle anymore. And they get an ultimatum. You either stop it or we're leaving. And they go back one more time. I just need one more time. Or people that go to rehab and get their life right, and then they get out of rehab, and the first thing they do is run to their dealer. And a lot of times they're even worse than if they had never gone in, because they go out in AOD because they're wanting it so bad, and they just jump right back into it. We've all heard of those kinds of things. They give their life for one moment of pleasure. How many marriages have been ruined because of that? How many friendships have been ruined because of that? Because we allow ourselves to see the situation in ways that shouldn't be seen. We should think better than we do. So we have our situations, and we have to make a decision. The situation that I'm in may seem very difficult, but sometimes the difficulty is only in our mind. Sometimes the difficulty is really a choice that we have to make. Am I going to have faith in God, or am I going to put my flesh first? When we see it that way, that's the way we should see it. And a lot of times we don't see it that way. But the way we should see it is, am I going to trust in God, have faith in God that He's going to provide for me and the things that I need? And if I think that I'm going to die, is it really going to happen, first of all? But also, is it worth dying to keep my relationship with God? Or am I going to pursue the things of the flesh? The whole book of Ecclesiastes addresses that question. And all the pursuits of humans and all the things that we chase after in this world, and the riches and the pleasures and all the things that he lists. I mean, there's so many things that go on in that book. He says, I've tried every bit of them. I've done it all. And the conclusion I came up to is it's all absolutely worthless. It's all vanity. It's chasing after the wind. It's trying to grab wind with your fingers or put it in a net. You can't do it. There's no end to it, first of all. It just continues on and on and on. You can't ever achieve that moment of pleasure and happiness that will fulfill you for the rest of your life. It's not there. It's chasing after the wind. It's pipe dreams. And yet at the same time, to fear God and keep His commandments, this is what we're made for. This is who we are. And so the people that live life to the fullest are not the ones who are chasing after the things of the world and chasing after the feelings and chasing after the adrenaline rushes and all the things that we think are important. The people who live their life to the fullest are those who understand who God is and submit themselves to His will, because that is what lasts. And that is what will take us beyond this life into the next life, and we can live eternity with that. Or we can go and take something that will fade and tarnish and turn to ash in our very hands. And then what will we have? Nothing. This is exactly what Esau did. He took something he gave up the promises and blessings of God to put something in his belly that would be digested in a couple of hours. How can he do that? The same way we do the same things, sin, and the things that we do. So don't despise your birthright. As I said before, you can talk yourself into anything. It's all about what you value. Look with me in Matthew chapter 6. And Jesus directly addresses this idea of what we value. Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 through 24. It says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Now, I think sometimes, I don't know if it's wrong, but sometimes I think we, in my opinion, we see this still in a physical, worldly way, where I'm not getting treasures here. I'm just doing something so I can have great treasures when I'm in heaven. The point is not that when you get to heaven, if you postpone the pleasures of this world, that when you get to heaven, you get to have lots of riches and lots of gold, right? That's not really the point at all. The point is the blessings of heaven are so much greater than the blessings of this world and the things of this world. And we don't want to get them confused. What is it that you really treasure? Do you treasure a relationship with God and the promised blessings of God and to be with God for eternity? Or do you treasure the things that make you happy right now on this earth? That's what the real question is. And that's what Jesus is saying. And I love how he says this in verse 21 because it seems backwards when you first think about it. For your treasure is, there your heart will be also. You might think, well, where my heart is, that's the things that I treasure. But he says the things that you treasure is going to be where your heart is. So whatever you think is shiny, whatever you think is important, whatever you think is something that just, you got to have it, that's where your heart is going to be. So if your relationship with God is what you demand, what you must have, and what you recognize that you can't do without, that's where your heart's going to be with God. But if your treasure is the things of this world, if your treasure is the shiny little things of I want to make sure I have everything that I want and everything that I need, I want to provide for me, and I've got to have boats, and I've got to have airplanes, and I have this and that. If those are the things that you treasure, you know what? You can probably find those things. You can probably get those things if you're willing to make the sacrifices for them. And oftentimes the sacrifices that you make are family, friends, and ultimately heaven. And it's not wrong to have things, but if you sacrifice everything to have them, it's foolish. They can't do anything for you. What will you do in the end with all that money and all those possessions and all those things and all that peace and tranquility that you've purchased in this world? How will that buy you anything in heaven, in the spiritual realm? It'll all be destroyed. What do you have left? Nothing. Have those things in your possession that will last forever. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And then he goes in verses 22 and 23, and you might think, well, these aren't related, but they are very much related. The lamp of the body is the eye. If therefore the eye is good, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? So he's talking about things that we're looking at, the things that we see. In verse 22, when it says, the lamp of the body is eye, if therefore your eye is good, the word good there means clear or healthy. That we see clearly. And then the other one is evil or unhealthy. And from some of the commentaries I've read, the word really is talking about eyes that are looking in different directions. Things are fuzzy because you're seeing in two different ways. And that's really what he's talking about here. I had a friend who one time he had an eye that would point off in a direction. And I had to ask him, which eye should I look at? And that boy would switch it up on me. And I asked him one time, I said, can you actually see two things at one time? He said, no. You're concentrated on one thing. You can't see two things at one time. You can't do that. You can't pursue two things at one time. You're either pursuing God or you're pursuing the world. There's no pursuing both of them, and that's his point. Whatever you're pursuing is going to have to be. You're going to be focused if you're going to get there. And so he says, don't lay up for yourself treasures in heaven. And also when he's talking about the eye, he's talking about the things that you're seeking, right? The things that you're looking for in the world. If you're single focused looking for the things of God, you will find the things of God. But if you're not single focused looking for the things of God, your eyes are unhealthy. In fact, he says, you are really trying to do two things at once. Because look at what he says in verse 24. No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will be loyal to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. And so often we think that we can. We think that we can have it all. We think that we're going to have all the things of this world and pursue those things with all that we've got, and also we're going to pursue God at the same time. Now, there's nothing wrong with providing for your family. There's nothing wrong with doing the things that we have to do to survive, but it comes down to, what is your focus? What are you actually looking to do? Are the riches what is really important to you? Are they merely a tool so that you can use to provide for yourself so that you can seek God first? When we have those things in the proper perspective, sure, there's nothing wrong with them. But when they become our focus, we're wrong. And we've missed the boat. We need to be very careful of that. And we might be like Esau, giving up everything just for a taste of something great. Look in Hebrews chapter 12, verses 14 through 16. And this really is talking about the same kind of mindset. It says, "Pursue peace with all people and holiness, without which no one will see the Lord. Looking carefully lest anyone fall short of the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness springing up cause trouble, and by this many become defiled. Lest there be any fornicator or profane person like Esau, who for one morsel of food sold his birthright." There's the warning for us. Let us not be like Esau, who gave up everything for a small morsel of food. Give up eternity with God for a little bit of pleasure on this earth. But I've got to survive. I've got to live. No, you don't. We've been crucified with Christ. Nevertheless, we live. Yet not I, but Christ lives in me. The life that we now live in flesh, we live by faith in the Son of God who loved us and gave himself for us. If it needs be that we are crucified or we die in the pursuit of our relationship with God, we've not lost everything. We've gained everything. But if we deny the flesh, and if we deny the spirit and we deny the spiritual in pursuit of the flesh, we have lost everything, no matter how much we gain. And this is the same story. So it's not with Esau. You would think that this was a huge, monumental thing. It was. But it's a very small thing to ask for food. It's a very small decision. In his mind, it was very small to say, well, I'll go ahead and have my birthright. It really didn't amount anything to him. And that's the way it is sometimes with Christians. What does it mean to you? What does your relationship with God mean to you? And if it's not meaning the right thing, you're going to be in trouble. Never value the common over the holy. And that really is the heart of why we must never blaspheme God. One last passage is Philippians chapter 3. Philippians chapter 3 and verse 18 through 21. It says, "For many walk, of whom I have told you often, and now tell you even weeping, that they are the enemies of the cross of Christ, whose end is destruction, whose God is their belly, whose glory is in their shame, who set their mind on earthly things." These are the people who are the enemies of the cross. And I want you to notice who it is that he says. Yeah, we have the description in verse 19, but the end of the verse says the people he's talking about are those people who set their mind on earthly things. Those day-to-day decisions that we make, the decisions that we make like I said, on a daily basis of whether or not we're following God or choosing to do what he wants or not, those are what determine whether or not we're enemies of the cross of Christ. And the enemy of God doesn't have to be one who stands out on the street corner declaring himself to be an atheist. An enemy of God can be sitting in a pew who simply says, I don't want to do what God wants me to do. I'm going to pursue the world instead of God. You might ask, why would somebody be at church if they're pursuing the world? I don't know, but it happens. We can read of Jesus casting out demons who were in the synagogue, in Bible class, and they were there with them. We can have those kinds of same mentality, and we need to be very careful that we're not that way. So make sure that we are pursuing what God wants. Our citizenship is in heaven, from which we also eagerly wait for the Savior, the Lord Jesus Christ, who will transform our lowly body, that it may be conformed to his glorious body according to the working by which he is even able to subdue all things to himself. And this is our focus. We are looking for that heavenly reward. And our pursuits have everything to do with where we're going to spend eternity. So the question tonight is, what are you pursuing? What's really important to you? What is it that you treasure? Your heart's going to be there. It already is there. If there's anything we can help you with tonight, please let us know. If you need prayers of the church or something that if you need to sit down and talk with someone, whatever it is that we can do to help you, please let us know. And won't you please come as we stand and sing.